Hello there. In this lesson, we're going to learn about the respiratory system. A respiratory system is the group of organs responsible for bringing in oxygen that all cells need and getting rid of carbon dioxide, which is a waste product. So there's a bunch of organs and features that go into making that possible in a human. So that's what we're going to focus on, and a little bit about other animals at the end. So hopefully you recall that inside all cells, respiration, cellular respiration is what occurs in order to release energy for use. So you'll need some sort of fuel that you get from your food and some oxygen to allow this reaction to happen. That's going to release the energy, producing some carbon dioxide, which is a waste product we want to get rid of, and some water, of course, which doesn't really hurt anything. So in order to do that in a multicellular organism, you need a way to get some of that oxygen that's out in the atmosphere inside so that all the cells can have it. And then you got to get rid of all this excess CO2 that's being produced inside all these cells to get rid of it outside of the organism. So that's what we're going to do inside of this system. Of course, it's also going to depend on the circulatory system to deliver those gases to where they need to go. And so you'll see that interaction as well. So the first stage in this whole process is that the air with the oxygen is going to be drawn in through the nose or drawn in through the mouth and pass along through these nasal passageways or through the mouth to the back of the throat here, which is called the pharynx. As it passes through here, it's going to get warmed up and the moisture level is going to increase as well. There's lots of saliva and mucosal membranes there that are very wet, and that's going to add moisture to the air. So that's really important for later on in order for all those gases to be able to diffuse. They also have to dissolve into the liquid parts of the cells that they are going to run into. So we want the air to be nice and warm, warmed up to body temperature, and nice and moist as it moves along. Another neat feature of the airway is that as the air is drawn in, air is not always perfectly clean. Sometimes there are going to be particles, bits of stuff in the air that you don't want further down into your lungs. So your body has some interesting features to help get rid of some of that stuff that's in the air. So the first thing is mucus, which is like a sticky fluid that's all along the outside. And the sticky fluid will stick to any particles that comes in contact with. So a lot of these particles will be picked up if they bump against the outside of the airway. The second feature are these little finger-like projections on the outside of the cells that line the airway. So they're kind of like those villi in your digestive tract, only these ones can move. And so what they do is they act like little sweepers, and as the mucus sticks to any dust or particles, they'll sweep those particles, those unwanted particles, up to the back of your throat, the pharynx again, and then you can cough and spit them out. You've probably all had some experience like this where you've been in like a really smoky environment, or campfire blew in the wrong direction and you got a face of smoke and you cough, 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 and then you can eventually spit it out because of the action of these little cilia and the mucus that they have all around them. So you might be wondering how the air knows or is able to go into the lungs in the first place, and that is courtesy of this muscle, this flat muscle that is just below the lungs called the diaphragm. And so the diaphragm here, when it contracts, it pulls downwards, and that is going to increase the volume in the lungs. When you increase the volume, that lowers the pressure inside, so low pressure. And so it's kind of like a vacuum. If there's higher pressure outside and lower pressure inside, it's going to force the air, or the air is going to be forced in by the pressure outside in the atmosphere. Now the reverse happens when the diaphragm relaxes. When it relaxes, it goes to this slack upward position, and that decreases the volume in the lungs, and that's going to mean that the pressure is higher inside than it is outside, and that's going to push the air out of the airway and out of the mouth and the nose. Now there's a couple other muscles that help out with this as well. Of course, you've got ribs that are all around here as well, and they have muscles on the inside and the outside that can pull and add to this increasing and decreasing of the volume that creates the difference in pressure and allows for the air to flow. So if you've ever looked at a cross section of broccoli when you're chopping it in your kitchen, you'll notice that there's a big main stalk here, and then it starts to divide into different passageways, and it'll keep dividing and dividing and dividing and dividing until eventually you get to little flowers at the end. So your lungs are kind of the same way. You'll have big air passageways at the beginning, and then they divide and divide and get smaller and smaller until eventually you get to these little air sacs at the end. These air sacs are called alveoli, and it's in those air sacs where the gas exchange occurs. And so they're surrounded by your old friend capillaries, which are those really thin blood vessels where gas exchange can occur right through the walls of those blood vessels. And these blue ones are the venous ones that are low oxygen, and the red ones are the ones that have received the oxygen and are going to carry that back to the heart and then out to the rest of the body. So you might be wondering at this point, once the air gets down into those alveoli, why does the air go from the alveoli into the capillaries, or if it's carbon dioxide, why does it go in the reverse? How does it know where to go? Well, the answer is due to the concentration, because particles will always move from where there's high concentration to where there's low concentration, and that process is called diffusion. So these are supposed to represent high and low concentration. You can see there's lots of dots in this guy, and there's fewer dots here. And so if they're given a chance, the particles, whether it's oxygen or carbon dioxide, will always move from high concentration to low concentration, from capillaries into alveoli or vice versa, depending on the concentration gradient. The other great thing about your lungs is that because those alveoli are so small, it provides a massive amount of surface area for this exchange to happen. Just like those villi down in your digestive tract that add surface area to allow for the absorption of nutrients. If you could flatten out all of those alveoli in your lungs, they say it's about half a tennis court size inside our lungs for this gas exchange to occur, which is amazing. So zooming in on the exchange around one alveoli, we have a capillary here carrying the blood. And as the blood shows up, it's got a high concentration of carbon dioxide and a low concentration of oxygen. So it's kind of that bluish color, right? Inside the alveoli, you got fresh air from outside. It's going to have a low concentration of carbon dioxide and a high concentration of oxygen. So this is how you get an exchange of gases going both directions, because the carbon dioxide is going to diffuse from high to low, which is out of the capillaries and into the alveoli. And the oxygen is going to do the reverse. It's going to go from the high concentration in the alveoli to the low concentration in the capillaries. And once the blood in the capillaries has passed over enough of the alveoli, they will have balanced out those concentrations and be ready to continue back to the heart. So thankfully, we don't have to think about breathing all the time, because our brain has an automatic feedback loop that does it for us. The way it works is it monitors the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood. There are special sensors that can pick up on the acidity of the blood. And that carbon dioxide level, if it's high, is going to trigger the brain to tell the lungs to breathe. And then the lungs will do so, and that will lower the amount of CO2 in the blood, and then so the brain will say, okay, you can relax, and then when it gets high again, the process continues round and around. So you don't really have to think about that. Now, you can override it somewhat. If you want to dive underwater, you can hold your breath for a little while. But eventually, your brain is going to take over and say, we need to get some air in here at some point. Another way or trick that you can use in order to hold your breath a little longer is by hyperventilating, which means blowing out rapidly a few times. And you might notice that you can hold your breath a little longer. You might see swimmers do this, or in adventure movies, if you need to hold your breath a long time underwater. If you hyperventilate for a few seconds before you go, you might be able to hold your breath a little bit longer underwater. It's pretty cool. All right, so finally, I just wanted to have a look at the respiratory systems in a couple other animals. I know the focus is on humans, but there's so many cool ways in which this is done in other animals. I had to include a few here. For all of our fish friends out there, the oxygen is dissolved into the water, and so we don't have to do that whole part where we warm it up and make it more moist. The oxygen's already dissolved, and so that water with the oxygen can just flow over the gills of the fish, and you can get gas exchange there, and the CO2 that's in excess, the waste product, can just dissolve into the water and be eliminated that way. Insects are so cool too. All of them, the way that they breathe is through these little holes in the sides of their abdomen that allow the air and gas exchange to occur there. And so the oxygen that's in the air here will go through those little trachea as well and be drawn right into the inside of the insect. And of course, carbon dioxide can come out there. And those little passageways will go right close to a lot of the cells where the gases are needed. And so they don't have to breathe through their head at all. It is done through the side of their abdomen, which is really neat. All right, hope that helped, and we'll talk to you soon.